third meeting, I'm at a bar in Boston with this guy, CFO of a large organization, and we're having drinks. And he leaned across the table to me and he goes, man, sometimes I don't know what I'm doing. No shit, man. That's all of us. Welcome to In the Arena. My name is Shaun Dyke, managing partner with DoorTwo. We thought it'd be fun to do something a little bit different today. So we're going to go through a different approach. You're just going to hear just me, my melodic voice all day. I have no partner with me in here today. We received a series of curiosities, questions, the conundrums that people grapple with. So we're going to do a bit of an AMA. Thought that would be kind of fun, and Ask Me Anything. The team curated a list of questions that came in authentic style. I literally just got these. And so we're going to do off the cuff, real world reality. And I think some of the fun behind this is these are real questions that people are curious about and that we navigate as coaches in these spaces. So it's a little bit of behind the scenes. You'll hear me try to grapple with them as authentically as I can. I guarantee I'm not going to have answers to all the questions as we go through it. They're also grouped categorically around real challenges and real curiosities people think about. So I'm going to give you the macro categories, and then we'll go through those questions. So first category is really the hidden gap. What is it that separates those who really make that jump to C-suite level? What executives won't say? The behind the closed doors truth. That's a really fun one because there are countless things that people think they aren't supposed to say or aren't supposed to ask. And so it's quite common that when I actually get to close the door, just be on a call one-on-one, like what are those real questions that tend to come up? So we'll hit that one. Then a little bit more granular, like tactical career decisions, the moves that tend to actually compound. So what are some of those things that when we build upon them, they actually have material effect on the progress in your career? And then the last one is perhaps one of the most challenging ones to work through is the inner game. So identity, fear, and the cost of the seat. So we'll walk through all of those. We'll try to answer them as organically as possible. And let's have fun with it. So first question says, when you first sit down with a high performer, can you tell right away if they'll make it to the C-suite or top out as a very good VP? Most immediate and direct answer is no. You can't tell that right away, partly because that would assume that they've chosen to stop learning. You know, there's a incredibly commonly used phrase that the learners will inherit the earth, while the learned will find themselves perfectly equipped to deal with a world that no longer exists. So the people that we work with, the space that I get to work in, it assumes that individuals are self-aware and want to continue growing. So I'm meeting people at a point in time. I know I can read where they are at that time, what their accomplishments have been and what aspirations they may have, but I don't know if they're going to cap out at that space. You do start to understand, though, whether or not they have some of the raw ingredients for them. Is curiosity present in them at levels that we're looking for? Do they have horsepower and intelligence? Do they have an appropriate sense of self-worth? Is their social identity kind of clear? Or if they're still in a really sort of egocentric space where they're struggling with self, they're still trying to figure out who they are, then maybe that ramp's going to be a bit slower. But I can't necessarily, and I would say no one on the team would say they can determine, yeah, this individual is going to cap out here. Not when we first meet them. Now, if I've had the opportunity to sit with someone for a long time, we're probably going to be better suited to know that. And most of the time, the individuals recognize that as well. They know that it's not what they want to do. I'd say as an example, there have been times that I'm pulled into a situation to coach someone. And most of what we do is we get to coach sort of three categories of people: high potential, high profile, high impact. And they're looking to optimize in some way, get a little bit better at what they're doing. And there have been times that I've been asked to sit down and help someone evolve something about themselves that they just don't want to. They're not interested in it. And in fact, they don't need to. And so as an example, there was a gentleman that I was coaching. He was very senior in the org. He was not at C-suite level, but he was really close. And he was really soft-spoken. So his genuine and general way that he talked to people was very muted. It was very quiet. It was very genuine, but it was just very soft. And he kept getting feedback that he needed to get a stronger voice with more command and more presence in what he was doing. And he was probably 5 years out from retirement. And the question I asked him was, do you want to get better at this? I mean, do you authentically feel like this is something you want to do? And I really admired his honest answer, which was no. And from my standpoint, I was happy that he said that, because the trade-offs involved in shifting that about himself, those are big. Those are really challenging. To take 55 years of learned exposure and experience and then figure out how I'm going to fundamentally change something that's so organic and authentic in me, that takes effort. It takes a willingness. And he didn't have an interest in that. So in a scenario like that, we can read mutually that you've probably hit a point where you're happy with where you are and you don't want to move beyond it. But there's absolutely no way, I would say, we can ascertain when you first sit down with somebody if they've capped out in their capability set. It would go against everything we believe, which is all growth starts with self-awareness. So if you have high enough self-awareness, you're willing to invest in yourself and grow, then there's significant potential that lies in wait. Fun question. Question 2. You've watched hundreds of talented people get within reach of the C-suite. What's the most common reason a genuinely capable person stalls one level below it? What is the thing they never see coming? My first thought is, I don't know that there is a thing, but there's some pretty common patterns. We are often in spots where the people we coach have not yet reached the C-suite. I mean, they're really close, or they're moving up the ranks. And I also think it's important to calibrate something. There are C-suite individuals that we work with that run very effective organizations, but they're of a size and a complexity that in a giant global conglomerate, the director level individual there is handling at a complementary stress level. So sometimes just looking at the org structure or the org layer, it needs to be contextualized in the size of the business as well. But we'll assume either way that we've got a talented individual and they're just stalling out a bit and moving into the next space. Almost always, the real fun part to hear is this is a self-inflicted problem. It is not an other-inflicted problem. It isn't necessarily the organization that's holding them back in it. It's often a function of their success at this point is predicated on a pattern of behavior that served them and is no longer serving them. So my behavior pattern was an asset. It's now a liability. And I don't have enough feedback information to increase my awareness on it. What do we mean by that? We had a gentleman on here not that long ago named Keith Butler that said, I realized at some point in time, self-awareness wasn't enough. I can know enough about me, but I'm probably going to need some external perspectives at times to realize, like, where do I really need to push beyond it? So what I see more often than not is they've got a stylistic way they speak, engage, communicate, convey, and develop people. And that playbook has worked. And the challenge is the playbook is no longer working. And there's a really significant fear tied in abandoning that or feeling like they're letting go of that. The competency model they've used to be really successful up until this point, we now got to get them to shift that lens. And everything in them will restrict or hold them back because they want to use and activate the same things that they historically have done. A comical example that comes to mind in this, at one point in time, I was chatting with the curriculum head for a college, a university. And this wasn't that long ago, which you'll think it is based on what I'm going to say. Most of the instructors were still using like overheads. They like had like the clear overhead sheets that they would write on them. You got to have some age on you to even know that experience with them. And they were trying to get them to move to something a little more current, a little more present day. And the resistance was just elevated because for the last 15 years, this was the tool they used, the information they used. They knew how to put their competency on display with this tool set. That's a barrier. If you feel like you're going to be in a spot where you're going to look incompetent or you are unclear, and that creates an unconscious or conscious sort of panic state in you, you regress back to those prior points of fixation on the stuff that you could do. So you don't want to do that. There's a fear around it. So I'd say if there's something that holds people back, it oftentimes is what made them successful before. They want to cling to that, anchor to that, and they have a hard time letting go of it to move on to the next thing. Certainly have fallen victim to that myself as well. Number 3, is the jump to the C-suite about getting better at what you already do or becoming a different kind of person? What actually has to change? Is it about you becoming a different kind of person? Likely no. If we're talking one tier up, likely no. You've likely, who you are as a human and how you show up as a leader, you probably didn't get to this point without having a series of attributes that is serving you and that you're going to move into that. And that sounds a little contradictory to the question that I just answered, but meaning it's not usually a specific competency set inside of it there. Becoming a different kind of a person, no, and maybe. What do I mean by that? If you worked in an environment where the stylistic approach you used was more command and control, and you move organizations, and the culture there does not serve the customer promise in the same way, then you're definitely going to have to demonstrate a different behavior pattern. That doesn't fundamentally mean you're a different person, but you may have to show up different. So this is where I think range comes into play. As a leader, are you able to take pulse of the situation and then make a material shift in how you're choosing to show up with people? So we oftentimes say that you have an infinite number of ways that you can respond to the world around you, but we tend to default to the ones that are the most convenient or the ones that we've, got the most well-worn paths around. So do you have to become a different person? Probably not. I wouldn't think that's the case. I would think that you have to activate different strengths that you maybe haven't done. Chris and I were actually having a conversation about authenticity and the conversation about people being their authentic selves. And what do we think about that? And my headspace was, well, it kind of depends. If you're authentically an asshole, probably not. That might be something that you have got to learn to change about you. So if stylistically you come across in a condescending manner or a very self-interested way, and for whatever reason that has worked inside of the organization, because it does at times and the organizations feed it, then yeah, I would say in those points, you got to hold up a mirror, or someone needs to hold up a mirror to you. And there's some significant shifts that you need to make about how you're choosing to show up in the world. I guess that's how I'd go about that one. So what actually has to change, that final question in that? I guess it's context specific and goal specific. There's worlds where nothing has to change. I work with leaders or have worked with leaders, maybe I'll qualify it that way. I don't still work with them for these reasons, where they're self-interested and they're aggressive and they're not other-oriented. And they go into an organization and they tear things up. They're competent and they're capable. And they manage to kind of be successful-ish for a few years. And then they roll out of that organization, and then their LinkedIn profile says something really cool about them. And then they worked at some really amazing place. And so they get recruited again and they run that cycle again for a couple of years. I don't encourage that. You leave a wake of damage in your path. So if you want to be successful in the standpoint that we're talking about, really having extraordinary impact, what has to change is, I guess, your willingness to look at your current state, the context around you, and make a conscious choice to determine if you need to evolve the way you approach your leadership in order to be effective in that environment. And that's a hard one. That is genuinely a hard one to do. Because again, you're having to potentially shift away from or abandon stylistically, like the things that you've done in the past. All right, next sets. Need a cup of coffee first though, hang on. Okay. This is behind the closed doors. This is going to be a fun one. What's the biggest myth that ambitious leaders believe about life in the C-suite? And how different is the reality once they arrive? So in essence, what do the best CEOs actually spend their days on versus what an 35-year-old imagines that the job would be? I think a lot of leaders will think, those people that are sitting around that big table having the conversations about the strategy of our business and where we're going to go, that there's just this pronounced level of clarity and confidence in what they're doing. It's just completely not the case. I mean, it's just not, period. I was sitting at my dinner table the other day, and we had made some decisions that we were going to do here at DoorTwo. And some of those things were working well, and some of them weren't. And I was sitting at my dinner table, and the kids were getting up and clearing the table. And I found myself a little bit adrift in thoughts thinking, shoot, did I make the right call there? Were those the right things? And did I over rotate on it? Did I put too much effort or energy into those ideas that I had confidence in, but maybe not competence in? That exists constantly at the table. It is not this space where certainty exists. Hope exists, optimism exists, but there is so much absence of certainty and no one you get to go to. That table, those that sit in those roles, they don't have someone to turn to most of the time. It's that group that needs to figure it out. And then there are hundreds or thousands of people that are directly affected by those actions and inactions you take. And then who knows how many indirectly with family systems and people that surround them. So I think one of the biggest myths is, man, I'm going to get there. We're going to sit around with this incredible group of leaders and we're going to figure out how things are going to go. And yeah, that's true, but it's going to be way messier than you might think it is. There's not some perfect script or plan or path most of the time. I also think one of the things I go back to as well is, I wish it wasn't the case, but it's politically charged in most C-suites. And I think people listening to this would not be surprised about that. So I think the hope is that we're going to get together at this table of C-suite executives, and there's going to be amplified levels of candor and high levels of trust and open dialogue around it. And I mean, there is that to a degree in healthy organizations. That's certainly present. But there's also pre-meetings and back channel dialogues and preparations that needs to happen. And then people got to be conscious. Sometimes you politically say something or step on somebody's toes in spots that doesn't always go well. And I think anybody that would believe that's not true, they're just missing a core part of the human condition. This is just the case. There's ego, there's identity, there's insecurity, there's trust issues. Those are all real elements. So all those stuff that you've sort of grappled with as you've gone up in your career, those things will exist there, probably muted, probably better at navigating them, but they're clearly still there. So that last question, what do the best CEOs actually spend their days on? We tend to say that there's three things the CEO can't delegate. They can't delegate culture, they can't delegate strategy, and they can't delegate competence. So in an ideal world, CEOs and C-suite individuals are helping ensure that culture is curated with intention in service of the customer promise, what they really are trying to create inside of that culture, not accidental, with intention. We say this all the time. Culture is not what you profess, it's what you tolerate and reward. So what are they doing? They're spending time looking at behaviors of the leaders around them and reinforcing what they need to see. The second thing is strategy. They're looking at, are we putting resources toward the big bets and the big wins, highest and best use of the talent and the team that we've got, and we're channeling those in the most effective way. And then the last one sounds kind of weird. It's competence, meaning, are we positioning ourselves to scale effectively? Do I know that the competence of the individuals that I am delegating task and activity to, they have that? That's present and capable in them. We say all the time that leaders mistake confidence for competence often because we've got eager individuals that are trying to grow and they're trying to be effective at what they're doing. And they'll say, I got this, let me roll with it. And then we give them some task or activity or project or opportunity. And we didn't do a fair job of ensuring that they were ready for that task. We wanted to extend trust inside of that, which we should do. We wanted to believe in those capabilities, which we absolutely should do. But we also need to make sure that they're competent and capable in those spots to really deliver on what they need to deliver for them and for you. It's those three spaces that I would encourage where they focus. Is that where most C-suites focus? We probably know the answer to that. Most of the time, no. They reach too far down into the weeds. They operate at a lower altitude than they really should be operating. Those are usually distress-driven, they're panic-driven, they're states of the organization-driven. So they reach too far back in and they start doing things at a lower level, partly because they know how to control that because they did it at some point in their career, partly because it's satisfying to them, because it hits that achievement itch for them. But in reality, we're going to be way better served if we can pull up an altitude at that level, understand you're going to be working with major ambiguity, that no one is going to give you the answers, and that you have to be good guardians of culture, strategy, and competence. I think I'd say those. How much of reaching the top is competence, and how much is politics, relationships, timing, luck, or something else entirely? Look, it's all to a degree. Clearly, you can get so far without having competence in what you're doing, but you got to have the horsepower and the capability in it. Politics, I think, always has a negative connotation with it. I think if we languaged that as stakeholder management and influence in relationships, then yeah, that's critical. Timing, of course, and luck. I don't think luck doesn't hit me there. Luck is, what's the great phrase around luck? It's when preparation and opportunity meet one another. So I think if we mean I am prepared for it and an opportunity showed up, that's competence and timing, sure, but I don't think it's around luck. And then the last one is it's something else entirely. I think one of the biggest pieces is, as what we say all the time here, is that all growth starts with self-awareness, a big, big piece of self-awareness. Are you aware of the impact you have on others? When you walk into a room, do you know the effect you're having on the room and the people in the room? It's a good one for you to just process through in the moment as you're listening to this. Like, do you know that? Do you know whether or not people want you in their room, that you invite clarity for them, that you invite confidence in them, or do you create insecurity or self-doubt or self-protectionist mindset? If you don't have enough self-awareness to know how you're being experienced, and then enough sense of agency to adjust that, then the competence you have becomes a liability, as we just talked about. The relationship management becomes constrained because you have an inability to shift. And then it really doesn't matter from a timing standpoint because you're not in a ready state around it. So I would say reaching the top, yeah, it's a function of all those things, competence, relationships, and timing, but they're not static. They're constantly evolving. And it's only through your self-awareness on you being able to orient yourself in the context and the content of the moment, and then make material changes about who you are in response to that environment. That's what's critical. That's what's necessary. So I'd say a dynamic ability and your range and bringing that present is one of the most important elements in reaching the top. Let's see, what do we got? When the door closes and it's just you and a CEO, what do they admit to you that they never say publicly or even to their inner circle? This is amazing. This was a CFO, so we'll give it a close one, but I'll use the CFO as an example. The person has been very successful in everything about their career path. In high school, they were competent and capable and held positions. In college, they were the top of their class. And they are now this CFO of a large organization. And by all rights, from many of the things associated with process and structure in the financial world, they're doing great there. But they are losing out because their relational capabilities are incredibly low. So I had met with them a couple of times. And as you would expect in those spots, everyone postures. They struggle to allow themselves to truly be seen. There's just a lot of insecurity in that. So third meeting, I'm at a bar in Boston with this guy. We're having drinks and we've had dinner. We are chatting now for a good hour and a half, and he's still really dropped into that posture of perfection. And at some point, he just kind of goes silent. And he starts kind of awkwardly looking over his shoulders, like around the room, like someone was listening. And then he leaned across the table to me and he goes, man, sometimes I don't know what I'm doing. And you could tell that was this real acknowledgement for him and a real vulnerable moment. And in my head, I'm thinking, no shit, man, that's all of us all the time. We don't know this. We just project often that we think we know. So what do I get whenever the door closes? If we've created the space for people to genuinely know that we have them, that they can be super transparent on where they're just winging it and where they don't know and where they're stumbling through it. That's what we get. We get real world exposure. We get real world challenges. We get the business problems that they're navigating, but we also get the really hard conversation they had with their spouse at breakfast this morning, or the stress that they're having with their son that's trying to get into a college and just grappling with some element that they're working through. So what does the behind the closed doors give us? It gives us the real human most of the time. They genuinely allow us to see into those parts that aren't perfect. Always describe it as like that, the barbed wire and the bruises that like, we're just not perfect in what we're doing. And I've been knocking around trying to show up as capable and confident and projecting certainty in how I show up. And when we get to close that door and I'm behind a door and get a moment with them, you see a collapse. Sounds aggressive, but I am going to use that word. We see the collapse into the whole human. It's no longer the CEO or the CFO. It's the person. I think of a story where there was I had a boss at Nestle. I'll be appropriate and keep his name out of this, even though he's an incredible human and really a lot of attribution to my career success goes to him. But this part of it, I'll leave his name out of. He got promoted, and in Nestle, inside of the corporate headquarters at the time, there were very few actual offices. They were mostly cubes. Even if you're pretty senior, the offices were really only reserved for like VPs and above. And he gets promoted to a VP role, and he's moving in, and he's a capable, competent, kind of stoic guy a lot of times. And all of a sudden, I hear him like he's whispering to me. He's like from his room, he's like shout whispering. He's going, Shaun. And I look up, and he says, come here. And I walk into his office, and I've always described it as all of a sudden, this 8-year-old is there with me. And he says with all the enthusiasm in the world, somebody left a lava lamp in here. The previous person, the executive that had occupied that room, had left behind like a lava lamp in one of the cabinets, and he found it. And he was proud, and he was overjoyed that he got promoted. And he was in the corner office, and you could see that his normal projection of confidence and competence, while real, he is that human, he's also just a vulnerable guy that was proud of the success that he had made and was looking for a moment to share that with somebody. And it came through in the form of a lava lamp. So it's, we get real people when the door closes. We get real individuals working with real challenges and working through genuinely difficult scenarios. I think if you ask people in our firm, I think that's what we feel the most fortunate that people are willing to do with us, that they're willing to take their guard down and let us into like what they're genuinely working through in their worlds, what they're really struggling with as that whole person, the leader, the spouse, the parent, the friend, the son, the daughter, whatever those elements are. And we get to help them amplify their whole leadership in all facets of what they're doing because of the willingness to really let us see that. And I would say that they do not share that with their inner circle most of the time. All right, so let's jump into that third section. And this one's more about like the tactical career decisions, the moves that actually compound. All right, this question is, how do you know when it's time to leave a company versus stay and fight for the next level? What's the signal most people miss? So it is really common that people that we're working with are grappling with their current state satisfaction, their capability sets, and the needs of the organization. And so they're trying to figure out, is this where I'm retiring? Is this where my next career path is going to go, the next job for me? And the funny part is too, is most of the time they actually don't want to signal that to anybody because they feel like it would signal lack of loyalty, when my encouragement for them is, I promise you, every single person here is working with that curiosity for themselves as well. Like, is this working for me? Do I still find satisfaction in this? Is the sort of the need state of the business and the people still match what my capabilities are? So that happens all the time. So let's put it in the context of when somebody is trying to figure out, is it time for me to leave versus stay and fight for the next level, or even just stay and fight for where I am. I tend to have a conversation with folks that says, do you feel like and experience that you have genuine visibility and awareness around the current state? What do we mean by that? Chief strategy officer that I worked with at a big business, she was frustrated. Things were suboptimal for her in the way they were. And we sat down and said, all right, let's name those. Let's figure out what they are. And so we went through the process of figuring out where relational dynamics weren't where they needed to be, or where investment decisions to support the collective strategy weren't being approved, or there was historical politics or elements that were tied into it. And, it took weeks to really sort of define the map. Now, once you have the map and you have awareness, you now have responsibility. Because what we got to do at that point was make a decision. The decision is we stay fully informed. We know what the reality is. We know the trade-offs that we have to employ. We know that these things aren't perfect. I'm going to have to influence relationships if I want them to change. I know that process and systems are maybe suboptimal. So I am eyes wide open on my current reality. So my message to them in those situations is always, great. You now get to do like the coolest thing. You get to decide if the trade-offs are worth it. Do you find that your satisfaction is still at a level despite all of these things, and that you want to lean into influencing it toward a different place? If not, well, then you're in a spot where you now get to make an informed decision to exit the organization when it makes sense for you. My more aggressive lean in with them is what you don't get to do for yourself and the people that you lead is stay and bitch. Like you know the current reality. You're aware of the complexity in the situation. And you either choose to stay in the ring and keep swinging, or you choose to say, I'm going to get out of the ring. My analogy is if you walked into the emergency room doctor's lounge. So you've got a bunch of ER docs in there that are grabbing a cup of coffee and maybe having a snack. And you hear them saying, yeah, I just wish people would stop getting hurt. Well, that's your job. Your job is centered around helping individuals that get hurt as an ER doc. As an executive, your job is navigating ambiguity. It's navigating uncertainty. It is trying to bring clarity when it's not present. You're problem solving in your decision making. And that's hard. It is a challenging reality. But your decision point, whether to stay or leave, ought to be based off of an inventory of the current reality, eyes wide open, floodlight the situation and fully see what's happening. Now I make a choice. Do I want to stay in this? Do I believe that I can affect the outcomes? Do I think that the satisfaction level for myself and people around me, I can make those work effectively? If not, if you believe you are no longer at that spot or the trade-offs aren't worth it, then the writing's there. And here's the funny part about that. It's actually quite common that people are actually just looking for permission. They know it. They've gotten to that point where they don't feel like they can stay in the hunt and be successful. But they're looking for someone to say to them that you're not failing if you make those choices, that you're allowed to move on. Now, obviously, in the coaching work that I do, the goal is to help them affect the outcome in the best way possible. And if they reach the end of potential or possibility, then they get to make an informed choice and move on. Let's see. Next question. When someone steps into a bigger role, what should the first 90 days actually be about, and what do most people waste them on? I have a strong view on this one. I always say this to people when they're transferring into an organization. There's I should remember this offhand, but I believe it's a Japanese form in martial arts. When you are learning to practice a particular martial art. I am not somebody practiced in martial arts. I know the concept. There's a concept. It consists of 3 words, Shu-Ha-Ri. I'm going to spell it so that you can go search it. Shu is S-H-U, Ha is H-A, and Ri is R-I. And they are 3 stages that when you're learning a martial art, you're asked to occupy. These would be similar for the organization, but we'll make that transition in a second. In the Shu stage, what you're doing is you're learning all of the forms and approaches as they are. You're learning a blocking methodology. You're learning a defensive methodology. You're learning an offensive methodology. You're learning all of the ways the current art is practiced. You're not questioning it. You're not trying to change it. You are learning about it because the legacy methods that are employed were probably put in place with sound logic, good reasoned, and well-considered individuals. So learn that portion. The next portion is called Ha. This is a renovation stage. This is now, let's take the things that I've learned and see how I can make adjustments to those existing forms in the martial arts world to improve my odds in an offensive or a defensive posture. I can get better at it from that standpoint. So in the business context, let's learn through the Shu stage. And in the Ha stage, we get to renovate a bit. Are there process modifications we can make, tweaks and or changes? The Ri stage is the innovate stage. That is when the martial arts world, we fully understand all of the forms and we have renovated them as best as we can. There are now elements that we want to innovate, net new items that we've not historically done before that are going to make us better. But that is only after we understand both the Shu stage and the Ha stage in this. What normally happens, people come in on fire. They start coming in and they start questioning why this is done this way. Or we start saying, this doesn't make any sense. How the hell did this policy get in place? That's stupid. You know what we should do? And they start dropping in all of this restage innovative suggestions. And when you do that, you usually get organ failure rejection. The organization gets frustrated with you because you're not listening to what has happened. You're not giving due regard for the experience and the legacy that's come before you. So I tend to say in the world of Shu-Ha-Ri, it's all about the shoes. You got to pay attention to that early on, absorb and listen. The organization will push you away from that. They want action. They want change. You're going to be baited into the Ri stage. And the challenge is maintaining composure and confidence to know that you're going to be better served by living in that posture longer. So I would definitely encourage you to hang out in the Shu stage long enough. All right, last section, the inner game. I probably touched on some of these already, I bet, but let's see. So identity, fear, and the cost of the seat. That's a great phrase, the cost of the seat. Not a lot of questions in this one, so let me just hit one and we're going to expand on it. It's watching senior leadership up close. What price do people underestimate about wanting the top job? I ask people all the time, do you enjoy leading? Like when I start working with them, do you like leadership? And you'd be surprised at how many people say no. So then why did you become a leader? Societally, it's career progression. There tends to be a monetary increase whenever I take the new job. And so it just sequentially was like what I was supposed to do. But in truth, they like running solo more. They like doing their own things. They like controlling their outputs more effectively. They find joy in that. There's an achievement center around it that's really good, but oftentimes somehow they have found themselves in that spot. So I like to begin with, do you even like leading? So let's assume that an individual in this scenario actually does. When I ask those folks that question, they're the ones that say, it's where I derive my joy in helping individuals get better and seeing teams accomplish success and influencing people to incredible places. It's what I've tended to always say. I really thoroughly enjoy the idea of helping people recognize their potential and then realize it, get out of their own way by getting there. And if you're truly in that space where you love that, then that is, let's progress toward that top job as you see it. What's the cost of that seat? You've heard this many times, I'm sure, and it's true. It's lonely there, right? Heavy is the crown. Pick your phrase that talks about the difficulty of being in that spot. There is a burden that comes with that. There's an expectation that you are the one that final decision-making stops with, that you're the one that has the foresight of where the business is going to go and that you're helping guard that. Now, of course, you're curating knowledge from your team as well, but ultimately, you're supposed to be the tip of the spear in that scenario. Feedback dries up. There's a CFO that I coach in a business, and he said to me, I really, really want my team to be candid with me. And he does. He wants them to be authentic and honest. And they are, but it's filtered. And so his question was, why won't they? And my message to him was, sometimes in these roles, at these top seats, you just hold the keys to too many kingdoms. There's a fear for people, and you got to work at it a long time to get them to really be super honest with you and transparent. So what's one of the costs of that seat? You can lose transparency from folks. You can lose honesty from people because there's a fear tied into your role. I want to be clear about that. It's often not you. It is your role. And it's the seat that you're occupying that can create that anxiety for individuals. So you'll lose transparency. You also lose feedback. So people don't and aren't as willing to give you constructive feedback. Now you can create spaces and invite it, and I'd highly encourage you to surround yourself with people that are willing to do that, but you often do lose that. There's a desire to please the person that is in that seat or in that chair, and they will filter honest feedback. It can also be pretty dang lonely. Honestly, I find that is why many of the C-suite individuals we work with use a coach. They don't have a peer set in the same way, especially the CEO. The board is expecting something from them and their team is expecting something from them. And they live in this sort of limbo state in between the two of those where they don't have someone that they can capitalize on to socialize ideas with, to vent challenges through, and to just get authentic and honest feedback. And so all of a sudden the world kind of shrinks in and gets a little bit closer. And for those people that might be verbal processors or they like to team problem solve, they move into that spot and some of those things disappear. Now, of course, somebody listening could argue, well, that's not true for me. I'm a CEO of a business and I get to collaborate. And I get that. That's all true. And there are those moments and those times where it is you. It is on you. The burden falls to you to make those decisions. The burden falls to you to keep that information to yourself and not cascade it or share it because it's not ready yet. And there is a felt level of hard effect that lands on you in those roles. And so the cost of it can be pretty intense. I think like most things, there's payment in life. There's a cost to something. And there's that phrase that's probably been overused, but it's the idea of choosing your hard. Like it is hard to be in that spot, but you also get to make material decisions that affect people in incredibly positive ways, not only from a customer standpoint, but from the people that you get to work with. My partner and I, Stephanie, and our partners, Jeff and Susan, talk about all the time that we are incredibly fortunate that we get to run a business that really tries to curate environments where the people that are willing to work for us and with us, they want to. And so that means we have to be good guardians of how we treat them, how we handle them, how we approach them. And we swing and miss, certainly, hopefully less often than we hit it on target. But we appreciate the opportunity to get to do that for people. So is there a cost inherent in it? Yes. But there's a benefit side of that equation that way outweighs the cost for most people that choose to step into that seat. So, it's funny. I wasn't exactly sure, in full transparency, if I was going to enjoy this format, like what it would be like just trying to fire through these questions. But I actually found this to be quite fun. And I think it was thought-provoking for me. It kind of really forced me into thinking about some of these pieces on how I approach it. And I'm hopeful that for you, it also created thoughts or curiosities or provocations in your mind, or maybe even answered some of those for you as well. But I would say if you do have questions, send them to us. The easiest way to do that is just send it to us at info@DoorTwo.com. If they're questions you want answered on the podcast, we could do that here. If they're just questions in general about leadership in general or the topics that we like to discuss and approach, don't hesitate just to send those out as well. And we'll do our best to find ways to get answers back to you on them. And if these topic areas and the conversations we're having resonate with you, the encouragement that we're always going to give you is subscribe to our podcast. And we also have a newsletter that goes out that answers some of these questions or has these provocations and gives some of the summaries for the topics that we discuss on the podcast. You'd sign up for that at DoorTwo.com/sign up. So those are two ways in which you can continue getting some of these thoughts and information from us. thoroughly appreciate you taking the time and dedicating it to listen. I know time is hard to come by these days, so being willing to listen and invest in yourself is pretty powerful. Look forward to chatting with you next time. See you on the flip side.